All right, everybody, what's going on? How y'all doing? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I am your tour guide around the SWAC. See what else coming at you, and we are gonna do our third set of SWAC power rankings for the 2024-2025 season. Um, a lot of movement in the polls the last 2 weeks, so it's going to continue to be that way because SWAC basketball is definitely topsy turvy. Been some surprises, both good and bad, in the last week or so. So we're going to talk about all of that, and have a good time with that. Y'all also make sure y'all hit those socials. Facebook is Swag Talk, Instagram Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Like the video, comment, and share. And hit that notification bell to be alerted to any videos that I drop. Um, Swag Smoke coming at you live tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. Saturday morning, Friday night, one of the two. Gonna drop my Saturday picks. That's a short that I do, so I'll drop that either Friday night or Saturday morning. Sunday, we're gonna recap Saturday's games. Monday, I'll drop Sunday night, Monday morning, whatever. I'll drop a short for my Monday games picks, and we'll go from there. Signing day next week, so got a lot to talk about there, and working on a couple other things. Hopefully, we can make some things happen. But with that being said, man, let's go ahead and jump into this. We are through the first month of the season, so you kind of got a better idea now who's who and what's what. I mean, it's not nothing concrete. A lot of things still can change, but with one month of action down and everybody playing at least 7 games, you got a decent idea what these teams are. You don't know where nobody gonna finish per se, but you kind of got an idea of what these teams are. Um, Although there's still a few matchups that we haven't seen yet for the first time, so that's still some feeling out to do. But you're kind of getting a better idea of who's who and what's what. And we're gonna go ahead and start our standings like we always do. Start our rankings like we always do at number 12 and work our way up. Um, for the third time in these rankings, Valley is number 12. Rough weekend for them, dropping to 0-8, 2-19 overall. They last week they were number 12. They went 0-2 this past weekend, losing to Grambling and Southern. Valley is a team. I think when you look at this team, they do have a few, they do have a couple guys that I do like. Um, Not necessarily guys who will be stars anyway. They don't have a Raekwon Brown like they did last year, but I think a guy like Alvin Stredick, who averages 11 and a half points per game in conference play and 6.2 rebounds, is a guy who, is kind of their steady guy. Arthur Tate's another guy averaging 11 and a half points in conference play, shooting 30% from three, has 3.6 rebounds per game. And Donovan Sanders, smaller guard who can get to the basket from time to time, averaging about 8.3 points per game and 2 assists per game. Also leads the team with 16 steals. So they have some guys who can play. They just don't have the numbers, and they play a pace of ball that's not super slow, but they don't really play in a hurry. And if they fall behind, they don't really have the shooting to get back in it. They only average 55 points per game this season, giving up 76. So they're getting outscored by 21, almost 21 points per game, which is the worst in the league. Like I said, they're not shooting well. They're shooting 39% from the field. Opponents are shooting 47%, and 3-point shooting there last as well at 26%. They've only made 35 threes this season, which is the second fewest in the conference, and the opponents shoot 40% from three. So they just have been struggling on both ends of the court. They only make 4.4 threes per game. It's just been a rough go for them. And nothing's changed, and I don't see much changing this week. They go to Pine Bluff on Saturday. Um, so that's a battle of winless teams, but I think these are two different teams. Even though they both got winless records, I think Pine Bluff is a little bit ahead of them. So, you never know what could happen. But Valley right now, like I said, I almost they're gonna steal a game somewhere in the last month and a few days. But there's a possibility that they could not. not get there because, like I said, they don't really play an up and down style of game. And if a team can sprint out away from them, they're not really going to catch up because they're not a great 3-point shooting team. They don't really defend that well. They don't really rebound that well. And they can turn. They're prone to turnovers. So I think if they can they have to have things go just right for them to pick up a win. The game against Southern on Monday, they played a close game. I think they kept themselves in the game, but their lack of scoring really hurt them. They only scored 20 points in the second half. And so, they just don't really have the ability to get ahead of people and stay ahead of people. They had a lead against Grambling, couldn't hold it. So I think it's going to be tough for this team to get past where they are. And I think that's what's going to keep them at that 12 spot for a bit longer. Moving to number 11 is UAPB. Again, another disappointing weekend for them. 0-2 this weekend, losing 2 home games. Um, Dropping them to 0-7 in conference and 3-17 overall. They were number 11 last week and they stayed there. They have an interesting week this week. They have their game against Valley on Saturday, but they have a makeup game against Texas Southern on Tuesday. So instead of having just one game this week because they play in Valley, they have 2 games this week. So it's gonna be, they have a chance to, pick up a win and then see where they stand against a highly ranked TSU team. Pine Bluff is a team that they put, they can score at times. They're not necessarily a great team defensively. They're not bad either, but they can score. Right now they're averaging 74 points per game in conference play, but they're giving up 82, almost 83 points per game in conference. So they're just really struggling to stop people, and they're a team that can knock down threes. Um, bit streaky at times, but they're a team that can knock down threes. Um, and that's been kind of holding them back this season. They're shooting 32% from three, and they're making seven. They're making almost 7.5 threes per game. So they make quite a bit, and they, like I said, they can get hot. And when they get hot, they can really give you some issues. Um, they, like I said, their problem is on defensive end. Um, and that's just really been holding them back. They're pretty average rebounding team. They give up 36 rebounds. They average 36 rebounds, so they even there. Um, they not bad with turnovers. They average 14.7. They take away 13.4, so not a bad ratio. They're 1.2 minus 1.2 is not good, but it's not like really bad. They average 13.1 assists per game, so they offensively are very capable. They had a pretty they had a game against Southern last week where they were in the game, but they had a almost 8 minute scoring drought in the second half that took them totally out of the game. They jumped out early on Grambling, but they couldn't hold it. Made a late run to cut into the lead, but they're just not really being where they were. Dr. Bradley's kind of cooled off a little bit. Still averaging 22 points per game. I mean, he had what would be bad games for him this week. I think 13 and 16 points in these 2 games, but he still averages 22 points per game. Um, Caleb Jones is shooting 44% from three right now, leading the team in that aspect. Um, they need to get a little bit more from that from Christian Moore, who is their second leading scorer right now. I think he needs to kind of pick up the pep a little bit if Dr. Bradley is not getting it done. They have an interesting week, like I said. If they can get past Valley, which is at this point, what's this team confidence like? But if they can get past Valley, that game against TSU is interesting. I'm not saying they're gonna beat them, but playing at home in Pine Bluff, anything can happen. So if their shots fall, you just you just never know. You're gonna you just roll up the sleeves and see what happens. But I do think they're gonna probably still be in the same spot next week. They do have the potential to move up if they have a good home weekend, but the time is ticking, and with there being 10 slots in the tournament now, they still have a chance. I think they're gonna stack up a few wins. Not I don't think they're gonna go on a run, but I do think they're gonna stack up a few wins, and they may be able to challenge for that 10 spot and get in the tournament. Which again, a team like this with a guy who can go for 30 plus on a night, is always a tough team in a tournament setting. But their defensive deficiencies is probably going to keep them from making a run in a tournament. So you really don't want to see these guys if you can avoid them. But right now they are very cold. And speaking of cold, Prairie View, Prairie View right now is probably the coldest team in conference when it comes to wins and losses. Just a couple weeks ago, this team was sitting at 3-1, and they've lost. Um, and they've lost their last 4 games, so they're on a 4-game losing streak. Dropped from 3-1 to 3-5, and they dropped from number 7 last week to number 10. They were like number 3 or 4 in our first ranking, so they dropped almost completely. If it wasn't for Pine Bluff and Valley, they would probably be lower. Um, Rough weekend for them this weekend in Alabama. Couldn't come up with a win in either one of those games. Bama State game was close. They had a chance, but they couldn't really get over the hump. They play a decent tempo of ball. They're scoring 73 points per game. They're giving up 73 points per game. Um, they're shooting 46% from the field in conference play, which is second in the league. Um, the opponents shoot 46% as well, which is 10th in the league. So that's kind of where the issues are. They do play good 3-point defense. Opponents shooting 27%, and they're shooting 34%, which is fifth in the league. And they make about 6.5 threes per game, which is right in the middle of the pack. Rebounding is a big issue for this team. They're last in the league in rebounding. They don't have a lot of size, so they don't really, get it done there. They're averaging 28 rebounds per game, and they're giving up 37. So they're getting out rebounded by almost 10 rebounds per game, which is last in the league. 8.9 rebounds per game is the difference in rebounding margin. So if there's one spot that I think is going to always hurt them, is there. They do force a lot of turnovers, though. They force 18.3 turnovers per game, and they turn the ball over 13.9 points per turnover per game, and that puts them at a turnover margin of 4.3, which is second in the league. They average 12.6 assists per game. They do a great job with getting their hands on the ball. They average 10.7 steals per game. Their average at blocking shots, they block about 3.6 shots per game. But they just their lack of presence on the boards is probably what's going to really hurt them throughout the season, and they're going to have to find a way to get off of that slide. Tanaj Petway leads the team with 21.3 points per game, and they have a couple other guys in double figures too. Braylon Bush is at 15.6, and Jordan Tillman is at 10.6. So they have a nice little balance there. Bush is shooting 42% from three. Petway shooting 32%, and right now Marcel Bryant is leading rebounder with 5 per game, and Bush leads the team with 25 assists. So they have the talent. They just like I said, they just on a bad cold streak. Similar like last year, started off pretty decently, faded in the middle. We'll see if they can right the ship. They got Texas Southern this week. Right now, Prairie View is, like I said, they're 3-5 in conference, 4-17 overall. Dropped from number 7 to number 10 in the rankings. Went 0-2 this past weekend, and they have a game at Texas Southern, which even though it's a road game, it's a rivalry game. This could be the game that they turn their fortunes around. So it's always just one. You just really one game away from good or bad. And in their case, maybe that could be a start of a run for them. But if they can't get better on the boards, they're gonna have a tough time in a lot of these games, especially away from home. You need defense and rebounding on the road, and if you don't get that, you're gonna have a tough time. I'm a number 9 team. Could have been my number 18, but I kept them at 9 because the team at 8 won in the previous week, so I just bumped everybody up one spot, and that's Grambling. Grambling is kind of starting to turn it around at 3-4 after a rough start. They're 3-4 now, 5-14 overall. They took advantage of a very necessary and manageable road trip and got them 2 wins on the road. They climbed from number 10 to number 9 in our rankings, and they have 2 tough games at home this week, Jackson and Alcorn. So you're gonna find out a whole lot more about this Grambling team in these 2 games. Um, they're in a decent spot, sitting at 3-4. Um, there's on they're tied with Alabama A&M, but then there's like 3 teams in front of them at 4-3. Well, 4 teams in front of them at 4-3. Some of those teams are gonna lose. If they can win, they can find themselves in a decent spot. The window for the regular season championship is probably just about closed. I mean, they would have to basically go 11-0 down the stretch to finish at 14-4 and hope the people in front of them lose a bunch of games. But they still are in line for a good seed. So, I'm not saying that they're gonna get there. They're probably gonna get in as a 5, 6, 7 seed and cause somebody some problems. But they're kind of starting to find their form. Last game against Pine Bluff, they shot the ball extremely well from outside. They had probably their best 3-point shooting game. When actually this weekend, they shot the ball extremely well from 3 in both of their games, which is a difference from the previous games that they played, where they really was really struggling from the 3-point line. They're shooting 32% now from 3. They jumped from like 11-6 in that spot. They over 5.7 threes per game now. They were just over 4 last week. So they took advantage of this week. The opponent's still shooting really well from 3 at 39%. Grambling offensively, they're shooting 43% from the field. That number improved. Opponents are also shooting 43%. And Grambling right now, they're averaging 66 points per game, which is 11th in the league, and they're giving up 68. So they haven't really been ran out the gym in any loss, but the Prairie View loss at the beginning of the season. So they've been kind of finding their way and putting some things together. Still not a great rebounding team, averaging 32 rebounds per game, but they give up 32 rebounds per game. So they've been competitive there, but they haven't really won a lot of rebounding battles, and they don't really turn the ball over a lot. They turn the ball over 13.7 times per game. They also force 13.7 turnovers per game, and they do struggle with assists at times. They average 10.4 assists per game, and they average 7.4 steals per game. This, like I said, they have the guys that are capable. Burnett is a guy who can really light it up at times, and of course, Kentavious Dozier, who has kind of been up and down to start this season. He had a good game against Pine Bluff. Those 2 guys are the 2 guys in double figures for Grambling. Dozier at 10.2 and Burnett at 13.1. Burnett also averages 7 rebounds per game, which leads the team, and he averages 2.1 assists per game, which is second on the team. So he's a guy who's been doing a lot. He's shooting 44% from the 3-point line. Grambling doesn't have anybody on their team right now who's made double-digit threes. So they still aren't totally right, but they're starting to kind of get themselves together. And as they pick up wins and they kind of start to build that confidence, this team is still going to be a dangerous team in the tournament. So I think they're at a spot right now where they're just kind of playing themselves in the position. And if they can put themselves in a good spot, then I think they'll be a team that will be a force to reckon with in the tournament. Regular season is, like I said, probably out the window, but tournament is still there. So I'm looking for Grambling to continue a climb up these rankings, but it's gonna take some wins and two tough games. Um, and we'll see how this weekend does for them. If they can come out this weekend with two wins, then they're gonna obviously jump up the standings like crazy. If they don't, then they're gonna probably hover around where they at. So we'll see how this weekend goes for them. And it's a make. I don't want to say make or break, but it's a big weekend for them, especially at home. You want to get these wins. Number 8 is Alabama A&M, the Bulldogs. They had a 1-1 weekend, beating Prairie View, losing to Texas Southern. They moved up from 9 to 8. They're 3-4 in conference, and 7-11. Excuse me, 7-13 overall. They're tied with Grambling at 3-4. They take that trip to Florida this weekend, playing at FAMU and then at Bethune. Two games against teams that are just ahead of them in the standings. Um, so they do have an opportunity to make some noise. They score 79 points per game, which leads the league. They also like tops in the country, or top 2 or 3 in the country in possessions per game. So they play a very high paced game in terms of possession. So the opportunities to score are there for them and the opponents. But the opponents are averaging 77 points per game. So they have an up and down type of game with most people. Um, and so they're able to hold their own there, but they haven't really been great um, keeping team from scoring. They haven't really shot extremely well, shooting 41% from the field, which is 10th in the league. They're allowing 42% on defense. Their 3-point shooting has been rough this season. They're shooting 29%, 58 of 197. They make they make 8.3 threes per game. So even though that they shoot a lot, they shoot a lot of threes. They make a decent clip, but their percentage is not good. So obviously they don't make as many as they should. I mean, they've almost taken 200 threes this season at 197. And that's most in the league by 16. So they shoot way more threes than anybody else. Even though their make number is high, that they made the second most threes in the conference. They just shoot so many and don't make a lot of them. So they're gonna have to retool that and try to get those shots to fall. That could be the difference in a couple games here and there. They allow 31% from 3-point range on defense. They lead the league in rebounding at 41.7 rebounds per game, and they give up 37 rebounds per game. So they have a positive rebounding margin. They lead the league in rebounding margin. We're here the second in the league in rebounding margin at 4.7 rebounds per game. Um, they've kind of gotten that turnover issue under control a little bit, but that number is still high at 20.3 turnovers per game. To me, that and 3-point shooting are right now the Achilles heel. Although they do force 16 turnovers a game, which is a decent number, but they still have a negative turnover ratio because they turn the ball over more than anybody in the league. Um, and they average 14.6 assists per game. So they do a good job of sharing the ball, which is tops in the league. Um, and it's second in block shots. They block 5 a game. They're averaging steals at about 8.1 per game. They just been one of those teams that they haven't really. They can run with it, they can run and score with anybody, but they just haven't got over the hump in all those games. AC Bryant leads the team right now with a 17-point average. He also is shooting 37% from 3, which leads the team. He is averaging 6.1 rebounds per game, and he has 13 assists and 9 steals. So he's doing really well. Leading the team, Chad Moody is at 9.5 points per game, and he averages 7.5 rebounds per game to lead the team. He also has 19 blocks. So, that's a guy that really is a rim protector and definitely doing a good job of keeping teams from getting those buckets inside. And that's going to be, something that can maybe propel them up the ladder if they can continue to cut down on turnovers and get some of those threes to fall. They're not scared to shoot them, but they need to start making more of them. and that'll get them a better opportunity. Number 7 is Bethune-Cookman. This team dropped from number 3 last week. Um, they dropped from number 4 last week. Rough weekend for them, going 0-2, losing at Jackson State in a game that they kind of was in. And the same thing at Alcorn, they lost both of those games on the road. So their 3 losses are on the road. They haven't lost at home yet. They've only played two home games, I believe, but they haven't lost at home yet. They get some interesting opponents. They get Bama State and Alabama and them at home. This is a big weekend. They need to kind of rebound from that 0-2 stretch, and find try to find a way to get some rhythm. They're 4-3 right now, 7-13 overall. They need to try to find a way to get back on the right track. Because right now, this team is they don't. I looked at their possessions per game. They don't really play as slow as I thought, but they don't really score a lot. They score in 66 points per game, but they've been a really good defensive team. Now they gave up over 80 points against Jackson State, but that's a team that scores a lot of points. Alcorn game was probably more similar to what their scores typically are. They're giving up 65 points per game. So, they have a scoring margin that's 2.4 on the positive side. Again, like I said, offensively, that's where their struggles are. Shooting 41% from the field. The opponent shoot 40%. That's third in the league in field goal percentage defense. They're shooting 32% from 3. They make about 6 threes per game. The opponents only shoot 22%. So they play really good defense out on the perimeter and force you to take some bad shots. They just haven't got a lot of their shots to fall. They average 37 rebounds per game, and they're giving up 34. So they're winning the rebounding battle in a lot of their games. They average 14 turnovers per game. They force 12.1, and they average 12.7 assists per game. Like I said, they're just not a team that's gonna score a lot of points on you. And so they want to keep it in that mid 60s, the low 70s range. And typically they keep you under 60, they win. So if they can score like 66 and hold you to 57, 58, obviously they're gonna win. But if they can hold you to under 60, then they're probably gonna win more than they lose. Trey Thomas is averaging 16.8 points per game. Breon Freeman, who's been out, he's averaging 15.6 points per game. And Daniel Ruzon is averaging 13.5 points per game. Ruzon also leads the team with 5.5 rebounds per game, along with, he's second on the team. Reggie Ward averages 8.1 rebounds per game. They have like 4 guys average 2 assists per game. And they have Khalil Kamara has 9 steals to lead the team. Like I said, they just have to get themselves back on track. I always say when you go on the road, you want to go 1-1. If you go 1-1 or 2-0, obviously 2-0 is a great weekend on the road. 1-1 to me is a positive, depending on who you lose to. But 1-1 on the road is positive to me. Going 0-2 is obviously worst case. So they need to come home and pick up these 2 wins to keep themselves on pace, because if they were to drop those 2 games, then they go from 4-3 to 4-5, and that puts them behind Alabama A&M and Bama State, among other teams. So they are kind of in a spot where they can slide, but if they win those games, they can climb, because they're not that far out of it. They only like 2 games out of second place. They're 3 games out of first. That's not bad. So they still have an opportunity to make some push, but they have to find a way to pick up these wins against 2 opponents that are going to be tough at home. That takes us to number 7, and that is Alabama State. The Hornets, number 6. The Hornets, they moved up. Well, they stayed at 6. Even though they went 1-1 at home, they stayed at number 6. There wasn't a lot of movement in the middle had a big jump from somebody at the bottom. They kind of just hung around in this spot because they won and lost. Um, but they take their Florida trip this week, going to Bethune on Saturday and FAMU on Monday. Right now they're 4-3 in conference. That's a pretty solid spot. 7-11 overall. Excuse me. Three and what they 4-3 and 8-12 overall. So they're in a decent spot. I still like Bama State as a team that can really make some things happen. They don't turn the ball over much. They average less than barely over 9 turnovers per game. They don't really force a lot of turnovers, right at 13.9, but they don't turn the ball over, and so that's always a good thing. Um, and their assist to turnover ratio is 1.2. They average 11.7 assists per game, so not a high number, but they are very capable. They score about 73 points per game. Defensively, they give up 71, so they win the scoring margin there. Um, they haven't really shot well. They're shooting 41% from the field. Defensively, the opponents shoot 42%. Their 3-point shooting right now they're averaging they're shooting 30%. They take a lot of threes too, July, Alabama, and them. Not as many as the Bulldogs, but they take 100. Have made 56, which is also in that top portion of the conference, and they make 8 threes a game. So they shoot a lot of threes, and they make some, but they don't make as many as you should when you shoot that high number of threes. Defensively, the opponents shoot 34% from three. Um, they average 36 rebounds per game, and they give up 36. So that's an even rebounding margin. I'm interested to see how this team does. Like I said, on the road, they got guys that I do like a lot. Um, right now, CJ Hines leads the team at 14 and a half points per game. Knox is right behind him at 14.2. TJ Madlock is at 11. Madlock also averages 8.2 rebounds per game. Um, and they have, they have 4 guys with at least 2 assists per game. So they do a pretty good job of doing things in a good manner. They're not the most explosive team, and they're obviously not going to shoot you out of the gym. But they have guys, if they can get hot, they can cause you some problems. Michael Simpson is shooting 38% from three. Knox is shooting 33. Hines at 38. Um, so they do have guys that can make a good deal of threes if they get hot, but they also can have those cold streaks, and that can slow you down. Um, like I say, 1-1 on the road is very important. They playing, two teams who are kind of going in different directions, but dangerous nonetheless. And so, that's one of the reasons why I think this team just held where they were. A 2-0 weekend would have definitely bumped them up higher. But losing one game, winning one game kind of kept them right there in the middle. That takes us to our number 5 team, which is Alcorn. Again, another team went 1-1. This team should have been 2-0 this week. Um, you're up by 20 against FAMU with about 14 minutes to go in the game, and you lose you lose. So blowing that big lead at home, that stings. That was one of their better shooting performances in the first half. Um, and then they went, then they couldn't get it done in the second half. Um, this team is still, I think they're going to be a team that is going to hover around that 4, 5, 6 range. They average 66 points per game. Defensively, they're second in the league at points per game at 64. So they're not they don't really have a ton of high scoring games, and they do a pretty decent job of keeping opponents off the scoreboard. They just haven't really shot well consistently. They're shooting 42% from the field. The opponents are shooting 41%. Their 3-point shooting hasn't been great. They're shooting 29% there. Like I said, they did have a big first half from three against FAMU, but they cooled off. They've only made 34 threes, which is the fewest in the league. Um, and they've only shot 114, so they don't even really shoot a lot of threes, like a lot of teams do. And so they don't really build themselves around that. They make 4.9 threes per game, which is the second worst. The opponents shoot 28% from three, so they play good 3-point defense. They just haven't really been able to get those shots to fall. And they've been getting kind of they've had a couple games on the boards where they just they got had a tough night on the boards a couple times. They're averaging 34 rebounds per game. They're giving up 31, so they're pretty solid there. They have a positive rebounding margin. Um, Turnovers 15.4, which is kind of that's toward the high end. But they've done a decent job trying to get themselves right there. Um, they forced 14 turnovers per game, so they are negative in the turnover margin. But I think that those are things that can be improved. They don't really average a lot of assists at 9, and a lot of it is because they don't. I mean, obviously they don't make a lot of shots, so they've been kind of struggling knocking down shots, and so they're not really getting those assisted buckets. They're getting those turnovers into transition buckets, and guys just kind of getting their own shots here and there. But they going on the road to Southern and Grambling this weekend. It's an opportunity to get yourself right. Neither one of those games are going to be easy, but if you find a way to even take one of them, you still in the mix. If you win them both, you you're sitting at 6-3, which is definitely a good spot to be at the technically the halfway point in the season. Once you hit 9 games, you're basically in the halfway point. So I do think this team still has the ability to be a factor when the tournament comes around. I think they're gonna be a team that you just never. I think they're gonna be a wild card type team. You just never really know what you're gonna get from them game by game, and that's gonna always make them tough to pick and tough to predict. But I do think that they have the opportunity to make up some ground if they have a good weekend this upcoming weekend. Now the hottest team, well, technically they're not the hottest team, but they are an extremely hot team right now. And that's FAMU. They jumped up the rankings from number 11 in my first rankings to number 4 in my rankings now. And being tied with Bethune, Alabama State, Alcorn, I could have put them anywhere, but I put them at 4 because I wanted to reward them for being on this 4-game winning streak. That comeback at Alcorn, you know, they Sterling Young and Matthew, they shot the ball extremely well from outside. In that game, they made 9. I think they made 9 threes in the second half. They didn't make any in the first. The team was over 12 in the first half from 3. They made 9 threes in the second half alone. Basically in like a 5-minute stretch, they knocked down a bunch of threes and ate up that 20-point lead, and actually won by and ended up winning, obviously. But they shot the ball really well from outside, and Matthews and Young are both shooting the ball extremely well. They're both shooting over 44%. Matthews is at 44. Young is at 48. They both made. I mean, excuse me. They both. That's their 2-point percentage. Matthews is at 38% from 3, and Young is guys that can knock down those shots from outside. And when they get hot, you see what can happen. Um, they're still not a finished product yet, and that's something I think a lot of people need to look at. This team is gonna be, they picked up 2 big wins, and now they have great momentum coming back home against the Alabama teams. If they can come out of this with a positive outcome, they're going to continue to sit right there in that mix. Now, if they have a staying power, that's going to be the one thing that I want to see from them. If they can continue to knock down shots and kind of just stay tenacious and just keep themselves in games and give yourself opportunity. Right now, they're 4-3 in conference, 7-11 overall. They jumped from 8 to 4. So they went from 11 to 8 to 4. That's a big jump in 2 weeks. And like I said, two big wins on the road, giving them a good opportunity coming home against Alabama A&M and Bama State this weekend. So if they were to go 6-3 in their first 9 games, there's no other way to put it than that's an amazing turnaround for them in the early season. And if they finish that at 6-3, then I really do think they're going to be in the mix for a high seed going into the tournament. And who could have predicted that after the beginning of the season when they started off 0-3? Um, who that is a surprise to me. So I'm interested to see how they continue to go and grow. And that takes us to our number 3 team, and they had the opportunity to kind of keep themselves at 2, but losing one game at home and winning one game at home put them at 3, and that's Jackson State. They dropped to 5-2 in conference, 5-15 overall. Um, last week they were number 3. They stayed at 3. They get Grambling and Southern on the road again. Two big games with opportunity to keep pace in the conference and kind of establish yourself a little bit. That FAMU game was a game that honestly was a surprise to me. FAMU jumped out on them early. JSU made a run, but they just couldn't. They just couldn't overtake them permanently, and that cost them with a win. But this is a team that can score the ball. They average 78.9 points per game, down from 80 a couple games ago. Defensively, they give up 76 points per game, so they do give up. They do give up a good deal of points, and they're going to be up and down a little bit, up and down the floor. They shoot 40. They shoot 41% from the field. The opponents shoot 43%. Where this team shines is 3-point shooting. They shoot 38% from 3, 55 of 142, and um, they make 7.9 threes per game. Again, they shine at the 3-point line. They opponents shoot 32% from 3. When you look at what they do on the boards, they average 35 rebounds per game. The opponents are at 37, so they are getting out rebounded a little bit. Turnovers, they average 14 turnovers per game. They force 14.7, and they average 11.1 assists per game. And they block about 3.8 shots per game, and they average 8.7 steals per game, which is 4th in the league. So, they are a dangerous team, and like I say, primarily because they can shoot from outside. Deshaun Ruffin had a 37-point game against Bethune-Cookman this past weekend. Dorian McMillan, he had a game where he made 7 threes. They have guys that can shoot. Ruffin shooting 33% from the 3-point line. McMillan shooting 47%. Mitchell shooting 44%. So they do have guys that you need to account for on that 3-point line. And if they get hot, then you're gonna have a problem. Mansell's averaging 6.8 rebounds per game. McMillan is at 5.4. Grant is at 5.1. So even though their rebounding numbers aren't great, they do have size. So they can kind of mix it up with you inside, and they can bomb away from outside. You're gonna have to play a solid offensive game to beat this team. I don't think you're gonna have a lot of games where this team just gets shut down offensively, and teams can win with low scores. So you're gonna have to bring your shooting sleeve with you, and get shots up when you play these guys. And you gotta have to make them, because they're gonna take those threes and make those threes, and that's gonna make it tough for teams if they don't play a more aggressive offensive game against them. And like I said, they have a chance to kind of move up the rankings if they pick up a couple wins on the road. Like I said, they have two games that are going to be a challenge on the road, but they're manageable if they can, continue to play well. And so we'll see what they do. Number 2 is my number 2 team from last week, and that's Texas Southern. They continue to win. They are on a 6-game winning streak. They lost their first game of the season against Southern, and they haven't lost since. They're 6-1 in conference, 9-11 overall. They were number 2 last week. They stayed number 2. They're 2-0 on the road. They get Prairie View at home this week on Saturday, but they also got to go play Pine Bluff on Tuesday because of a makeup game from the bad weather that they had a couple weeks ago. So they have they're in a position that they're typically not in where they plan a game after Prairie View. So they have to kind of keep their emotions in check and keep themselves on an even keel going on the road against a Pine Bluff team who can be dangerous even though they haven't won a game in conference yet. Um, right now, TSU is playing good ball. I mean, they're not playing, they're not flashy in any aspect, but they score 74 points per game. They give up 66, so they play, they're playing good defense there. They lead the league in opponent field goal percentage at 36%. They haven't really, their shooting has improved the last few weeks. Like shooting 42% from the field. They shoot 35% from three, which is third in the league. Um, they make about 7.3 threes per game. The opponents shoot 32%. So they're a very good team when it comes to um, playing defense. Now they struggle on the defensive boards. They give up over 40 rebounds per game, 41.4, but they're second in the league in rebounding at 38.1 rebounds per game. So they've lost a couple of rebounding battles in a bad way, but they do they have been competitive in that aspect. Um, they average 14 turnovers per game, and they force 16.7, which is second in the league. So they do a good job of turning teams over, and they average 13.1 assists per game, which is tied for third in the league. So they do a good job of moving the ball and making those shots off of those passes. They lead the league in block shots at 5.4 per game, and they third in steals at 10.2 steals per game. So this is a very good team. Like I said, they're not flashy. They don't do a lot of things to kind of jump out at you. But when you look up, you're in a dogfight with these guys, and they're probably going to be ahead of you. Um, Right now, Zaire Hayes leads the team with 16 and a half points per game. Uh, McMillan is at McLean is at 14. Kenny Hunter is at 10.2. He also averages 5.7 rebounds per game. He has 12 blocks and 11 steals. That's a guy you need to know where he's at all times. He can definitely affect the game on the offensive end, on the defensive end. He can knock down a couple of jump shots from mid range too. So he's definitely a guy who you want to kind of keep an eye out on. Dwayne Posey is another guy who can get inside and bang around. He's averaging 3.6 rebounds per game. He also has 5 blocks and 6 steals. Um, McLean has 15 steals. He's averaging 4 assists per game. Again, this team is, they're not, they're not going to wow you. They're just going to beat you. And, obviously this is a team that I always say I don't worry about this team until March. But they're playing well right now. And that's definitely something to be wary of. They're definitely in a great spot for the regular season championship. Um, like I said, they have 2 games against teams who have had rough starts this season, this week. So if they can get through those games, one at home, one on the road. If they can get through those games, then they're at 8-1 after the first 9 games, and that's good. And that also will put them at 11-11, which gives them a 500 overall record. So they have a chance to kind of make some moves, and if they just keep themselves where they at and kind of stay in the cut, they're going to be able to pounce if Southern if Southern starts to drop games, which obviously Southern is my number 1 team. They're still undefeated at 7-0. They beat Pine Bluff because basically great defense in the second half. I went to a 2-3 zone and kind of stymied them. Pine Bluff went 8 minutes without scoring any points. Against Valley, they didn't really play a game. They played sloppy to an extent, but they still kept Valley from scoring many points. Valley only scored 42 points in that game, but Southern, it took them a while to get going, and they just never really looked sharp in that game. They have 2 tough games against Alcorn and Jackson State. These 2 games can really turn their season around. Like I said about a lot of teams, if they have a good homestand, then they're gonna find themselves, still with the lead in the conference, especially with a team like Texas Southern nipping at their heels. If they drop those 2 games, then they find themselves, kind of, still in the mix for the conference, but they'll be playing from behind at that point. This team is like I said, TSU is not a flashy team. Southern isn't either. Southern's a team that they score a decent. They score. They can score the ball, but they do it through a multiple guy approach. Are they third in the league in scoring at 74 points per game? The defense has been really good in keeping teams from scoring. The opponents are scoring 59 points per game. They lead the league in scoring margin at 15.3. They've had only a couple close games. They've won most games pretty decent margins, and they won a few games from start to finish. They lead the league in field goal percentage at 46%. The second in field goal defense at 37%. They're second in the league in 3-point percentage at 35. They make about 7 threes per game. Um, they're fourth in 3-point percentage for the opponents at 30%. They are third in rebounding at 38%, 38 rebounds per game. They lead the league in opponent rebounds at 29, and they lead the league in rebounding margin. And that's something Southern hasn't really done in recent years is rebound well. They're not a huge team in terms of like mass, but they have a bunch of guys who are kind of like the same height that get in there and kind of mix it up. They're athletic inside. They're not a big team inside, but they're athletic and they can get to the rebounds, and they have pretty solid guards that can do that as well. They average 13.9 turnovers per game and force 16.7, so they win that battle. They average 13.3 assists per game, which is second in the league, so they definitely do a good job of moving the ball around and making cuts and passing off those cuts. And they also average 4.8 blocks per game. So this team has been a good team. They're second in the league in steals at 10.7. They just are a team that doesn't really have a guy. Jordan Johnson is leading the team at 10.5 points per game. You have a couple guys at 9, Jacobs and Demasi hasn't really played. Um, but looking at conference numbers, like I said, Jordan Johnson is averaging 12 points per game, and then you have a couple guys at 8 points per game, and then you have a couple guys at 6, and then you have a couple guys at 5, and then you have a guy at 4. So they have a bunch of different guys who can lead the team in scoring in any night. Johnson is also the leading 3-point shooter, shooting 46% from three. Free throw shooting is probably going to be the one Achilles heel for this team. They don't shoot the free throws great. Thomas is their leading rebounder at 5.1 rebounds per game. A guy who's an unsung guy on this team that is really a good presence for them defensively is Andre Nunley. He has 21 steals this season. He's not a big guy. He's a little short, stocky guy, but he can get in there and he can get in there and get steals. He leads the league in steals at 3 per game. So he had a couple of big steals at the end of the half against Valley. He had a couple of steals against Pine Bluff. So they have that team approach, and the bench typically is going to score 30 points a game or so. They just don't have that guy that's going to just be like my 18, 19 point per game guy. And so that leads me into if you play close games, who's going to be the guy to take over? Most teams have that guy that they know that they can get the ball to, and he's going to get them a bucket, or he's going to at least put them in position to get a bucket. Who's going to be that guy for Southern consistently? That's probably one of the things that I want to look at as they move throughout the season. Their team approach is great right now, and I'm not knocking that. I think that's what works for them, and I think they'll continue with that. And so they're not they're not like head and shoulders above everybody else, but they're playing good ball. And they're not they're not having 6 or 7 wins are not like one possession games or something like that. So they're winning games in a decent margin, but the margin of difficulty it increases this weekend. Jackson and Alcorn are not going to be easy. They could very well win both of these games, or they can very well lose both of these games. So as a top team, their movement is very fluid this next weekend. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See well signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.